Welcome to PSD to HTML5 and CSS3. This video is called Layout, Styling the Footer. In this video, we're going to be focusing on finishing the CSS for the website. All we have left to do is to style the footer. This section down here, the sub footer with the sign up form and the footer with the copyright information and the sub or the navigation menu in the footer. This is the final design. It's quite simple, but we still have quite a bit of CSS left ahead of us. So let's jump right into it and open up our code editor. So let's have a look at our markup here to see where our footer is. And this is the section we're going to be styling. So let's, I'm just going to clear out this space that we did in the last video and go back down to the footer and focus on this right here. So like we did in the previous lectures, we centered these sections here. We centered them by giving a class to a div that wraps around that section with the class of container and clearfix to prevent any collapsing issues. And we reviewed that in the past videos. That's what's going to center the content here. We did it for this section as well, and we're also going to need to do it for these sections right here. So you might be familiar with how to do this now, but you can follow along. What we're going to need to do is wrap the content in between the secondary CTA tags in a div with the class of container and clearfix, because as you can see in the design, they have the full width of color. They have the gray going right to the edges of the browser, and same with the dark gray. So same thing. This is the secondary CTA section. This is the container. So let's do that. Wrap this content in a div, and let's tab that in and give this div the class of container and clearfix. Put a comment here so we know that's where it ends. Save that. Let's have a quick look at our website. That's looking good so far. Not awesome yet, but it will get there. Now let's do the footer. Let's just do that while we're on a roll with centering stuff. Same thing within the footer tags, because the footer tag is what's going to have the background of the dark gray, and the container on the inside is what's going to center the content. So go ahead and do that. Whoops, that's not right. Give this the class of container and clearfix. Comment. Save, refresh. All right, so we're getting there. It's all centered. It looks quite bad right now because we don't have any other styles, but we're on the right path. So let's go back to our CSS. And we're going to get started with some styles for the secondary call to action section. So we'll go back to our styles. And let's see, let's do it under the sidebar. Let's copy this again. And under the sidebar, paste that and call it this secondary call to action. So we know that this is the section that we will be styling. It'd be easy to find things. You can see now with a whole bunch of CSS, we have, what's that, over 300 lines of CSS, and this is a really small website. There's a lot of stuff here, but we can find our sections quite easily because we have them labeled, and that's a really nice thing. So let's go back up to this section. We called that secondary call to action. And let's start styling that. So we already have an ID of secondary CTA right here. So let's target that and select that by going like this, secondary CTA in our CSS. And let's start styling that. The background is going to be that light gray, and the light gray, we're going to have our little swatch palette up here. This is going to help us. It was the light gray. So copy that. Let's go back down here and let's paste that. like we have already covered, we don't need 6 of the same characters, so let's just minimize that to half, less typing, and let's save that. So there we go, that's getting there. Next up is we need some padding. The design has some padding on the top and bottom, and it looks to be roughly, and this looks to be about 40, but actually it's probably more like 30. Yep, 30 pixels of padding on the top and bottom, and you probably know how to do that now. Padding, we want top and bottom padding the same, left and right the same, with no padding at all. So 30 pixels top and bottom, 0 for left and right. Save. Whoops, wrong site. This is the one. There we go, we got our padding. Still, this looks kind of out of whack and I don't really like it, so let's fix it. Let's target or select, use our descendant selector. So we're selecting the level 4 heading within the secondary CTA section. And we're going to give it the font weight of 200 because it's very light. The font size, what is the font size? Let's go back to our Photoshop Mockup and let's use our type tool, click on that and see what the font size is. 24 pixel font size. Easy enough. Float, we want to float this to the left because we want this bad boy right here to pop up over here. So in order to do that, we know that we need to float this level 4 heading. So let's float it left. And let's also give it some margin. Let's actually wait for the margin until we see what happens. So it doesn't look like we need any margin yet. It looks fine. It looks even on top and bottom. That looks pretty consistent with the design. Yep, that looks good. So now let's make this look a bit better. Again, within the secondary call to action section, we're going to grab the form because we have a form in the markup. Here it is, right there. We want that. So form, we're selecting the form. And let's give that no margin because by default, some browsers give forms margin on the bottom, 10 or 15 pixels, or I actually think normalize.css gives forms margin on the bottom, and we don't want that, so we're gonna get rid of that. And we want to float it to the right. This might be a new concept. I don't know if we used float right yet, but if you read up, actually we did, so I lied. But if you read up on the floating article that was written by Chris Coyer, I totally recommend it because floating is a bizarre concept to understand at first. But once you read through it and put it into practice and mess up a bit and then just kind of practice it, you'll figure it out and it actually makes a lot of sense and it's not hard at all. So we're going to float it to the right because we want it to float all the way over to the right of the edge of the browser over here or the site over here because it's not that nice sitting right there. If we were to float it left, it would stay in this section. Floating it right, it's going to bring it all the way over here. So let's see if that worked. Yep, it did exactly what we wanted to do. However, this still kind of looks funky. Like that doesn't really look that good. This is a different size, I believe, or maybe not. But this is up against the edge of it. It's a nice size. It has a nice looking placeholder. So we want to fix that because that's not that nice. So go back to our CSS and we're going to want to go down to our global styles section because we want to make all of the inputs, this is called an input, look the same. We don't want just this section look the same. We don't want just the inputs in this section to look the same. We don't have any other form elements on the site yet, but if you were to build this site out and add an about section or a contact with a contact form, you're gonna be using a lot of these inputs and you want them to look consistent. So that's why we're going to be putting that in our global styles section. So let's select the input first. Input, and what we're going to do is we're going to do The first style that we added to the site, if you remember it, it was WebKit, font smoothing, and text rendering. So I'm going to copy that. The reason why I'm doing this again is because for some reason, the font smoothing and anti-aliasing doesn't get added to inputs. So if I were to type something, you might not be able to see it, but it's actually not anti-aliased or font smoothed. And same with the button. Like it's really, most people might not be able to notice it, but I actually noticed it, and it kind of bugs me. So we're going to make it consistent. You might be able to see it if I add this and save, and then I don't know if I can go in here and refresh. If you see that there, it's a little bit sharper. You can see that. So I'm going to take it out and see if you can see the difference. See that? That's clear. If you were to look at this right here, and now I'll put it back in, just watch. It's sharper, it's a little smaller, it's lighter. It looks, in my opinion, much better and much more crisp. And it's just a fine detail that makes a website stand out just a little bit more. So let's keep that in there. And keep that in mind, make a note of it. What's nice actually with Coda is you can create little code snippets, or clips as they call it, and you can use a keyword to add it. And so I don't want to remember how to write this every single time, and it's a lot of writing. So what I do is I created a little clip with the keyword of sexy text, because I think it makes the text look sexy. So I do that and I hit tab, and it spits the CSS out for me just like that. So if you have Coda, you can use clips, and you can add your own clips, and mine is sexy text if you want to steal that. Okay, so moving on, we're going to select the input, but more specifically the text inputs and the email inputs, because inputs are also buttons, but we want to only select this, but not only this one. We want to select all text inputs. So if we had a contact form or a search bar or something, we want all text inputs or email inputs. And this one specifically is an email input. So this is how you select that. Oops. There we go. So that's selecting a text input and an email input. So I'm selecting both of those. And I want them to have position of relative, and I want it to have padding of 10 pixels on the top, and these are kind of specific numbers, so 8 and then 9. So what this is, if you remember, when you use 3 arguments in this style, it means the first one is the top, the second one is the left and right, and the bottom and third is the bottom. So 10 pixels on the top, 8 pixels on left and right, and 9 pixels on the bottom. I did that because when I refresh, it's just it makes the height. Well, let's see. You can see that it's actually off by 1 pixel. It's not quite right. So let's fix that. I'm gonna give it a border of solid 1 pixel, light gray, and give it a width of 220 pixels, because that's how wide 4 columns is, and this input is 4 columns wide. So let's just quickly look at that and see. Okay, so it's the right width and it looks good, but this is kind of off here, so I need to fix that. So my original paddings from the other design is a little bit off, so let's just say 10 pixels and see what happens. Okay, so it looks off by 1 pixel right there. You can see that, and that bugs me. So it's not what we want. Let me zoom out here. Sorry about this. Okay, there we go. So 1 pixel off doesn't look good to me. So 10 pixels. 10 pixels on the left and right, and 11 pixels on the bottom to just bump it down 1 more pixel. There it is, bang on. But we have this little space right here, and I want it to be pushed right up against it. So that is about 5 pixels. Well, it says about 10 or 11. Maybe it's because I'm zoomed in. It's actually 5 pixels. Yep. So let's move that over by going margin, 0 on the top, -5 pixels on the right, 0 on the bottom, 0 on the left. This is going to pull the element over 5 pixels as opposed to push things away 5 pixels. So you'll see what I'm talking about. There it is. So it's nice and tight up against the button. Now if we look, that looks exactly how we want it to be. Couple variations. It looks a little bit different, but that's okay. Actually, we want this to be bold. So let's go to our buttons. Let's see. I believe we gave that one the class of button small. Yeah, so let's style button small to be a little bit more consistent. I think we're only going to need to add one style. We probably didn't even need the button small, but let's just add it anyway. Maybe we'll put it right here. Font weight, bold. Okay, perfect. This is what happened. So see how it's still 1 pixel up here? What we actually want to do now is maybe make this 11 pixels. Take this one out because it's the same. So now 11 pixels on the top, 11 pixels on the bottom, and 10 on the left and right. So let's see. Perfect. I think it's a little varied in the size here, but I actually kind of like the size of our website here. Kind of like that. It's okay for it to vary a little bit. If you're designing your own site and you know, and it varies a little bit by a few pixels or something like that, it doesn't need to be pixel perfect. It absolutely can be, and we can do that. All we would need to do is make the button small, have less padding on the top and the bottom and the left and the right to make it shorter, and then we would you know, make this equivalent to this, so the height wasn't as tall, which is essentially what this one is doing. But I kind of like that this is a little bit bigger. Just I don't know, it reads a little nicer to me. So that's how we're going to do it. So that's all for the secondary call to action, and let's move on to the last section of the website, the footer. So we'll go to our markup, and we've already centered this, so we're good for that. So we'll move on to the footer styles. Let's go to our style.css, and let's see here, navigation. Let's copy another one of these, paste it. Let's call it footer. And within this section, let's style our footer. So we have footer. We're going to select just the footer. The background is going to be that dark gray. I believe it was actually just gray. So copy that, go back down to your footer, paste that. We don't need all 6 of these. Let's put just 3 of them because that's all the same. Background is that. The color is going to be white. Currently it's the gray. We want it to stand out. And we want some padding on the top and the bottom, but let's see what we might need here. Okay, so the color didn't quite change to white here. Something happened. There we go. I guess I didn't save. We need some padding on the top and the bottom. I already know that it's 50 pixels on the top and the bottom, 0 on the left and the right. Let's have a look. That is looking a bit better. This is off and doesn't look good. So let's move on to this. First, what we're actually going to do is we're going to, if you can see, the copyright section is a block element, and it's actually taking up this entire width, therefore pushing the navigation below it. So we don't want that. We want to actually float the copyright section and make it less width, and float it so that we can also float the nav and bring it up to the same level as the copyright section, as it is in the design. Right there. It's on the same line. So let's do that. It's quite easy. Inside the footer, we're going to select the copyright section. I believe we named this copyright right here. This paragraph tag has the ID of copyright. So let's select that. We did right here. And what we're going to do is give it the width of, oh, let's see, how wide do we want to make it? Looks about 4 or 5 columns. Let's go 5 columns. 280 pixels. So width 280 pixels, that'll fit it even if it had a little bit more text, or the company name was longer. You could also make this longer if you wanted, as long as it doesn't, as long as it leaves enough space for the navigation. The navigation is going to need probably around 280 pixels as well. So as long as you leave at least 280 pixels, you can have this be as long as you want, 630 pixels, whatever. But we know for this it's only going to be 280 because that's as wide as we need. And we're going to float it left. Save that, go back to your browser, hit refresh, and we have them on the same line now. But the nav does not look good at all. You can't even see it. It's purple and gray and it's crunched together. It looks bad. Let's fix it. Footer, and then nav. So we're using a descendant selector to select the nav within the footer. So let's do that. The width is going to be 340 pixels, just because that'll be enough width to hold the navigation, and float it right. We're choosing float right instead of float left because we want it to actually bump up against the side of this container here as opposed to be floating beside the copyright section somewhere in the middle. So float right, we'll do that. You probably didn't really see a difference. It's just the fact that the widths are now able to, they're fixed, the widths, whereas before it would have just say you added a really long company name and it extended all the way over here. You had a bunch of information on one line and then it bumped up against the navigation here. The navigation would pop down below this line, and you don't want that. So what you want to do is fix the width. We fixed it to about 280 pixels. This one has about 320, I believe, and that way they won't conflict. They'll stay on the same line, and it will look good. So float right, and now we need to change the links within the footer because they're purple and you can't read them. So footer A. So all links within the footer, we're going to give the color of white. Text decoration, none, meaning I don't want any underlining at all. Margin, 0 top, 0 right, 0 bottom, 15 pixels on the left because I want the navigation links to have 15 pixels on the left to push them away from each other so it looks more like this so that you can read them. And I should probably be more specific for this part because just say we were to put an A link in the copyright section and we said copyright 2012 Brightside Studios and I made it a link to the Brightside Studios website. I don't want that because what's going to happen is it's just going to give that link a left margin of 15 pixels and it's going to look bad. So I want to be specific. So that would be my mistake for doing that. It'd be bad coding practice, and I'm going to be more specific. Footer, nav, A, and just give that style to just the A tags within the nav. And this will be for the all links. White with no text decoration, margin left on the navigation links. They should be good now. Now we need to be able to have that hover effect where you hover and it turns blue. So let's add that. Again, quite easy to do that. All you need to do is footer A hover, the pseudo class of hover, and when you hover, we're going to have the color of I believe it's light blue, and we have it up here. Copy that, go back down, and give it the color of the light blue. Save, refresh, and boom. There it is. So quick review. What we did in this video is we styled our secondary call to action section within the footer and the actual footer with our copyright information and our navigation bar. That is essentially it for the website, but we're not quite done yet, because what we need to do is we need to validate our HTML and CSS. We could have maybe forgot to close a tag, or we wrote something wrong in our CSS. There's a bunch of things that could go wrong, and it could throw some really big errors in browsers that aren't capable of understanding that, oh, you missed a closing HTML tag. I'll just assume that and put that in there for you. But you want to make sure that you just you don't rely on that, because you could throw some really big errors and you can have really bad user experiences on different browsers. So that's it for this video. In the next one, we're going to start validating our code, and then we're almost done. So I'll see you there.